Alright guys, there's been some confusion on how to read the spreadsheet, so I'm going to do a quick tutorial video on how to read it and how to use it to build your lineups. So this is the spreadsheet basically in its raw form. No stats are added yet. We'll get to everything means in a second. I just want to show you how it works. I'm going to go over here. I've already got the raw stats loaded into another spreadsheet, so I'm going to pull the raw stats up and we are going to plug them right here. And I'm going to wait for it to do its thing. Alright, so there's all the grades. Now I'm going to sort descending. Alright, so this is basically the spreadsheet. It's still not what you see when you look at it on screen, because I do hide a bunch of this fluff over here eventually. But I'll show you what everything means and how it works. So first off, we'll start here with the stats. So basically I use a lot of the metrics that we use in NBA DFS. So usage, obviously, pace, DVP, even though it's not as relevant as it used to be, I still use it. It's not weighted very heavily, but I still like to have it in there. Their average minutes last 5. Their average fantasy points last 5. Their average fantasy points on the season. Their projection, this is a basic projection model. This is something that just basically goes off of their points per minute, and then their average minutes played. Basically gives you this very basic projection, no fluff added to it yet. I'll show you what I do over here when I get the actual projection that I use. The over-under for the game, the spread for the game, and the player's current salary. So those are all things that I use to weight their grade. Over here's where all the algorithms are done. So obviously salary is part of the algorithm. If they're expensive, they're going to have a negative. If they're cheap, like 5,600 right here, they're going to have a positive. So that's just basically a slider depending on how expensive or how cheap they are. Usage, pretty easy. The higher the usage, the better the number. Pace, the faster the game, the better the number. DVP, depending on how good the matchup is, it'll be good or bad. CVP is a metric that I created. Basically, it stands for cost versus production. So basically what I did, I took all my cash games in DraftKings that I've ever played at NBA over the last 2 seasons, and I got an average min cashing lineup, which I think was like 270 something, I believe. I don't know, I have to go back and look up my calculations, but I took that average cashing salary and basically figured out how many points per dollar that was, and then that gives you sort of their cash game value, which is basically the minimum price or the minimum points they got to score at their current salary. So basically what this does is CVP is it looks at their last 5 games. If they've been outperforming their cash game salary over their last 5 games, obviously that's good. If they haven't been outperforming it, then it's bad. So that's why you got a negative number here. And it also shows you the indicators when we get to it in a minute over here, the fire and the ice. So that's that column right there. DraftKings points, obviously the higher the points they score on average, the better. So that's pretty easy to figure out. Over under, again, easy to figure out. It's right now it's showing 0 because I haven't plugged those numbers in yet. But the higher the over-under, the better. The spread is kind of the opposite. The lower the number, the better, because obviously if you got a game that's like a 1-point game, then it's a closer game. More points could be scored, so that's why that's there. All right, so that's explaining all the stat metrics. Now let's go over to actually how you use this. So the grade basically is all those weighted grades that I just showed you. This 0.3157 and this 0.0369, etc., etc. It's all added up and multiplied by 100. 100 being a perfect score, which a perfect score would be literally impossible. Because even if you had like Jimmy Butler, if he had, the best usage in the league and the highest paced game and the best matchup DVP and he's averaging 40 minutes a game and he's averaging, 60 fantasy points over his last 5. So basically every single category, he's crushing it. DraftKings won't have him priced at $3,000. So his salary will actually bring down those numbers. So there's no way that he can get 100%. The highest I've ever seen, I think, is a 70. I believe it was James Harden. Actually, a couple weeks ago, he had a 70% or a 70 grade. So it can get pretty high. This one's pretty typical, 47s, 42s, 38s. Those ones are pretty much normal. When you get those guys that are just crazy usage hogs like, James Harden, those numbers can get kind of ridiculous. The going for 2 projection, which is the next column here, is basically based on this projection that I got here, which is, like I said, again, it's just average fantasy points per minute times the amount of minutes that they're supposed to play that game. I take that number, and with the grade, basically the higher the grade, the higher the projection will go up. So with this 47.74, this projection over here of 47.8 gets up to 52.52. Obviously, the higher you are, the more it goes up. As you move down the list into the greens and the blues and the yellows, it may not go up quite as much. It may actually go down, like you can see. Oops, sorry about that. Close that. You can see this one right here for Kelly Olynyk. His projection was 21.1. He's in the risky category, just below the average. So his is 20.18. So not that great of a difference, but he is a little bit lower than his projection is over here. ROI is basically, again, going back to that cash game production. So if he scores 52.52 points, which I have him projected for, if he scores that at his current salary of $9,100, his return on investment is 111%, which obviously is good. So those are the kind of things you want to look for. As you can see, some of them are not so good. This guy, he's got a great grade, but his ROI is only 101%, which isn't bad. I mean, it's still in the good category. But if you can get purple on purple, that's probably your best you can get. Obviously, when you get down into the greens and blues, you can also find some purple matchups as well. Purple ROI, those are also good players. Usually, as you move down a little bit too, they get a little bit cheaper, like this Carmelo Anthony one right here. He's $5,600. He's got a good matchup, and he's 107 ROI. The next columns, the hot and cold, is strictly based on that CVP we talked about earlier, cost versus production. If they're outperforming their cash game value over their last 5 games to a certain point, they will get the hot icon. If they are underperforming to a certain extent over the last 5 games, they will get the cold icon. The only thing you got to be careful with here is to make sure, because it is the last 5 games, one outlier game can definitely change that drastically. For example, if you had somebody cheap, like let's say Kelly Olynyk right here, or was it? I just saw him. Let's just do Cody Zeller. Let's say Cody Zeller right here. Let's say he had a huge game 2 games ago. He had like 45 points, which is way out of his norm, but he had his regular games in the other 4 games. Then he might get the hot icon because of that one outlier game. So you got to make sure you check that, do some research to make sure that you're not just, plugging in a hot player thinking that he's going to continue being hot when actually he only had one big game. So be careful on that. That happens a lot too when players that don't get a lot of minutes suddenly get a ton of minutes, and they might get that hot icon. So be careful of that. And also the other thing that's kind of a flaw in the system is if a player's been out, 4, 5, 6 games, a month, or whatever, the program that I use to get their average last 5 actually skips all the games they missed and goes back to literally their last 5 games played. So you might have like someone who's been out for a while. Let's say Embiid was out for like 2 weeks, and he comes back and gets the hot icon. You're like, how does he get a hot icon? He hasn't played in 2 weeks. Well, because before he went out on injury, he was hot at his current salary. So you got to be careful of that as well. Going into the matchups, pretty easy here. 1 thumb up, 2 thumbs up, and then 3 thumbs up is basically the matchup based on DVP, strictly DVP. So obviously you click the 1 thumbs up, and this is a 5%. This is basically DVP over the mean, so over average. So if to point guards, so yeah, this is a point guard position. Let's say that so Washington gives up on average, let's just say, 30 points to point guards, and the average is 20 points to point guard for the league. Then it'll be a 5% increase. Again, if you go up to Jimmy Butler here, he's got 2. He's at 9% over average. If you go to Hachimura here, he's a 16% over average. So that's how I get those numbers there. I don't use like actual fancy points. I use percentage over average. Obviously, you see some in here that have a negative number. Tobias Harris is a negative number. So those are the things that are actually bad matchups. I haven't figured out how I wanted to put those in there. I did thumbs down for a while, but it got very confusing, and it was very hard to read because it had thumbs downs and thumbs ups in every single column. So I haven't figured out quite yet how to show bad matchups, but I will eventually add that as well. Back-to-backs, pretty easy to remember here. It's going to say in here yes, or it'll say yes or say nothing at all. Let me just show you what happens when I change. So this is the column that it pulls from. This is basically days rest. So if I go in here and put a 0 days rest in this column here, then it's going to show up as a yes over here. So that's for the guys you got to be careful of, like the Joel Embiids and the Kawhi Leonards that made that play on a back-to-back. It gives you that indicator to sort of give you like a caution flag, like, hey, check this guy, make sure he's playing tonight. Injury, pretty easy. Probable, questionable, doubtful, out. That'll be in this column right here. Player names, obviously position, salary, team, opponent. And then we talked about the stat categories over here. All right, so first thing I want to do, I want to show you how I get the spread salary, how that works. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take Jimmy Butler here. I'm going to do a very extreme example just so you can see how it changes. So let's just take, so his opponent is Atlanta. And so I'm going to go over to the Vegas chart here. We're going to go to Atlanta, which is right here. And I'm just going to make it a crazy number just so you can see how much it changes. 350 over under, and we'll just do a 20-point spread just to make it crazy. And then we'll go over to overall, and you will see how much his so he went from what 60 or 47 to a 63.74. Projection went up, ROI went up, so that's kind of where you get that from, the over under and the spread. Now it didn't go up quite as much because I did a very high spread. If I had done a lower spread, let's say I had done, let's go back and do let's do 1 just to see what it does. Go back over here. So yeah, it went up even more. Now it's 68. Projection went up, ROI went up. So that's kind of how the Vegas lines affect the numbers there. I don't weight them super heavily, but they are weighted in there. They are kind of factored into the grade as well. All right, what else? Okay, so let me show you the part, the stuff that you actually see. So I actually do this, and I have these little indicators. Don't hide that column. Don't hide that column. Don't hide that column. And I don't hide that column. Minimize all of that down to this is what you actually see. So I cut out all the fluff. All you're going to see basically is the stuff you need. The grade, projection, ROI, cold, hot, matchup, back-to-back, injury, player name, position, team, opponent, and their salary. You'll notice that some of these here are highlighted. I do that so that you can kind of quickly point out some values. So anything 5K and under is going to get highlighted. Sometimes you'll see one of these highlighted guys show up here. Like the other night, I believe Gordon Hayward was like $3,000 coming back. He was going to be a starter and no minutes limit. So obviously his price was crazy wrong, and he was the very top. Everything, grade, ROI, projection. And he had a salary of $3,000, so he was highlighted purple. So he was obviously the top player of the night. Easy to kind of figure that out. This is a 4-game slate that we're doing. So there's some of the numbers that you may not see. There's usually at least 1 or 2 guys that are going to be up higher, but because there's only 4 games, it does kind of limit it a little bit. All right, so now how do you actually use this to build lineups? Obviously, the purples, those are your best grades. May not be the best player to play. Don't just pick all the purple grades and think you're going to have a good night, because you can see like Trae Young here. He's got a good grade. He's got a decent projection, but at his current salary of $10,400, his ROI is only 92.67 or 61. So that's he's saying that he basically will underperform if he reaches my projection. Now that doesn't mean he won't do well and outscore that. That's just based on my projection. So some of the guys you want to look for are these guys with the purple salary or purple ROIs. You can even go down and look for some down here as well. 107, 117. 107 as well. Again, those are guys that are probably going to get more minutes for some reason, which is why they're cheaper in price, but projected to be pretty high. So that's why they got that higher percentage there. It could also be based on matchups. It could be based on the over-under of the game. It could be a high-scoring game. Those kind of things can give you a little bit different projection as well. Across the top, obviously, you got positions broken down: point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center. And then if you just want all guards for your flex positions, you have all guards, all forwards. I did a hot column as well. This is basically showing all your hot players. The only 2 players tonight are hot, Butler and Simmons. So that's that there. The value column are basically any players that are graded over a basically average, good, or best. So anything over 20 is going to be graded good. And then their salary over here is, obviously highlighted because it is under 5,000. So anybody under 5,000 with a decent grade will be on your value column. Let's see, video tutorial. This is where I'm going to post this video you're watching right now. How to read. If you forget any of what the columns mean, this explains it here. Cash game value chart. I put this here just for reference. So this is kind of the reference points that I use for cash game value, that formula I told you about with CVP. So if a player is $3,000, his cash game value, he needs to score is 15.38. And as he goes all the way up, I believe, until 13.5. So that's kind of where they need to score in order to reach their value. I think that might be everything. So you can kind of get an idea of how you want to build your lineups. The way I do it, I use the optimizer. I don't necessarily plug in my projections into the optimizer. You definitely could do that. What I like to do is actually plug in a couple of the guys that have the purple ROI. Like I may lock in Jimmy Butler, do a lineup with Jimmy Butler. I may lock in, let's say, CJ McCollum because he's got a high ROI. I'll lock him in a lineup and let it, do its optimizing thing. If you don't do an optimizer, I wouldn't go crazy trying to pick as many of these guys with the purple as you possibly can. Pick the ones that you like. Still use your own research in combination with this. This is just kind of limit your player pool. I wouldn't look at guys like, for example, Nikola Jokic. He's down here. He's risky. He's got a low projection. He's got a low ROI. He's been cold over his last few games. He's $9,000. That might eliminate Jokic for you for that night. You know what I mean? Or if you see somebody like Tyler Hero here, maybe you weren't thinking about him at all. But I mean, look at his grade is good. His ROI is really good. So maybe he's somebody you would want to look at. Actually, I don't know why his grade is so high. Oh, I know why. Because we changed Atlanta. I was like, why is his grade so high? He should be up there. But I forgot we had changed Atlanta's over-under to like something crazy. So his value went really up. So that's a bad example. But yeah, just going down here like Duncan Robinson. Oh, again, it's because of Atlanta. Sorry. Let me stop pointing at Atlanta players. Let me find somebody else that I like here. Let me go back to Carmelo Anthony. He's somebody that's pretty cheap, $5,600. He's got a good matchup, as you can see here. He's got a decent grade, good grade. Projects is 31 points. His ROI, if he scores 31 points, is 107. So maybe you want to look at Carmelo Anthony. It's just to kind of help you narrow your player pool. Take guys out, maybe add guys you weren't thinking about. But still, you want to do your own research because it's not the end-all, be-all. And not to mention that this is usually posted up around 3 p.m. each day. So we all know at NBA things change. So at 3 p.m., Butler may be playing and maybe good to go. And then, at 7 o'clock, right before the kickoff or tip, he's ruled out. So suddenly he becomes, a play you don't want to put in there, obviously. Or maybe one of these, fringe guys, ends up not starting that night. You want to make sure that you kind of, watch that as well. This isn't the end-all, be-all. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to update it throughout the day. I try to do the best I can. Usually goes up around 3:30. I only do it on the large slates. So this 4-game slate that I'm actually showing you here, I probably wouldn't even post this. It's not quite as good on small slates because the player pool is already small. But on 13 games or 10 games or 9 games, I'll post it. It'll help you narrow down some of the studs that you want to play, some of the values you want to look at, that kind of stuff. I think that's it. Again, guys, you can reach out to me in any of my Facebook groups that you may be in there with me. Obviously on Twitter as well, at Jeff Lambert77. You can always find me, pretty much anywhere in those Facebook groups. Just hit me up. Let me know if you have any questions, and I can definitely help you out.